Welcome back to not the CBC, but Sun News. Michael Corrin, The Arena. Men used to run away to sea, now they run away to the CBC. CBC, at war largely with itself, after weeks of being the centre of a horrible scandal involving Jan Ghomeshi, who the CBC is now steeped in more chaos as former leading hosts and personalities. They battle one another. CBC veteran Lyndon McIntyre left his post only this past year. He made a scathing speech at the University of Toronto last week about the toxic celebrity culture at the public broadcaster when it comes to its prominent figureheads. He was then banned, then promptly unbanned, and it's like the Soviet Union. Astounding show of conflicting views within the CBC itself. Notable journalists at the corporation have now spoken out and taken sides, and it's all great fun. JJ McCulloch joins us from Vancouver. McIntyre's piece in particular was scathing, and he either wrote it very badly or he was trying to make a point when he mentioned Ghomeshi and then spoke about Peter Zowski and Peter Mansbridge. Now, he later said, I wasn't implying that they had been accused of sadism, but it's hard to believe him now. I think he was trying to make a certain point about their behavior.
Yes, and actually, there's so many things moving in the CBC these days that I think actually you're conflating two different McIntyre-related scandals. Because the one was that he did an interview with the Globe and Mail in which he sort of made a sort of flippant remark about the sort of toxic culture of celebrity at the CBC, in which he basically said that the CBC has a lot of sort of divas on staff, and these divas throw temper tantrums and basically get away with really quite obnoxious behavior. And he sort of said, you know, Peter Mansbridge is one, you know, Jan Ghomeshi is one, Peter Zowski is one, and that was the sort of the thing that he got his, his ban for.
I mean, he didn't, just to make sure people understand, he wasn't in any way saying that the late Zowski or Peter Mansbridge behaved in the same way. He said that Ghomeshi got away with things because of a celebrity culture and questioned. I mean, he was maybe purposefully, maybe accidentally vague, but he just did enough to make people like Mansbridge, understandably, extremely angry. And then Neil MacDonald wrote a piece, I think a very good piece, responding and saying, McIntyre, you're a spoilt brat, effectively. I mean, these are sour grapes. It's not like that.
Well, MacDonald was actually writing in response to this long essay that McIntyre wrote. It was a speech that he gave, as you mentioned. And that was kind of I thought that MacDonald was actually in the right, because McIntyre was really putting himself on the cross with that speech that he gave. You know, this idea that he was this great paragon of virtue and that he was sort of the voice of wisdom. And, you know, I've worked at the CBC for 40 years, and let me tell you, I've seen a few things, and, you know, the old grey mare ain't what she used to be, and all this kind of thing. And MacDonald was basically like, you know, give me a break, old man. You know, I mean, and he's no young whippersnapper himself. But there is, I mean, kind of this idea that you're seeing is that what they sometimes call sort of end of regime behavior, and sort of when the mask is starting to slip, and people are suddenly becoming a lot more open to saying what's on their minds at the CBC. And it seems that what's on the minds of a lot of CBC employers, or a lot of CBC employees, I should say, is enormous contempt for each other. They all seem to have a lot of gossip, a lot of drama going on between each other that's often based around jealousy and resentment, and you know, particular resentment towards people that are seen as getting away with too much because of their sort of phony superstar status of one form or another. Yeah. What happened to McIntyre, though, and what I thought was a sort of good critique that some people have made, is that the degree to which he was sort of defenestrated, thrown under the bus by Peter Mansbridge's producer and Mansbridge's producer's wife, who is also a big muckety-muck at the CBC, it does kind of reinforce, you know, in its own sort of subtle way, the sort of culture that led to the Ghomeshi thing in the first place. Is that, you know, some people in CBC are treated with enormous reverence, and when people come out to criticize them, you know, they disappear in short order.
Okay, so but hold on, just because let's be fair here. I mean, first, I've not quite understood the hatred some people seem to have for Peter Mansbridge. I've only met him once, I think. He seemed quite charming and rather a modest fellow. I think he does a good job. I think he's a moderate face and voice. I think he's responsible. I don't find him particularly political. I think that some people at the CBC obviously have a bias. They're not at all objective. I know the way I've been treated over the years, or persona non grata, but I'm not here to attack Mansbridge. I think he's quite good at what he does. And it must have been devastating for him and for his wife to read about some of the things that were being said. And once again, it seemed to me that McIntyre, maybe he was just clumsy, but he was implying something that was far more personal and intimate that was going wrong than just the way people behaved around the office. Well, you better be right when you say those things. Otherwise, you can't just smash people's careers and reputations.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that a problem with all of this kind of stuff that seems to be floating around is that it is sort of making the personal public. It is getting into a lot of stuff that is really essentially workplace politics, workplace drama, and really bringing it out into the open. And I think just because a lot of CBC employers, a lot of CBC employees, I should say, feel really under attack right now. Morale is clearly very low. The Ghomeshi thing was an enormous black eye at a time when they're already facing budget cuts and, frankly, when they're already quite unpopular. I mean, let's not forget, at the end of the day, the CBC is not a popular network. Most people are not watching what it has to offer, not even its news broadcasting, contrary to widespread public opinion. And when I talk to CBC employees, I find that morale tends to be very low because it is difficult to be on a network that's not popular. It's difficult to be the source of a great deal of hate, I think often quite justified, about from irate taxpayers who regret having their big, having their taxes go to pay for your...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Don't we work for Sun News, though?
I know.
If you want to be hated, look. You know what? The point you make, though, is extremely valid. I had no idea, and maybe it's just sort of the solipsism of not being at the CBC. I assumed they felt very confident. I now realise just how low morale is there. I didn't know that, and cuts. And I'm not saying that my heart is bleeding. I'm not even making a comment about it, but it is low. There are certain personalities at the CBC, certain people who are revered in Canada, and they do a fine job. But I don't know what's going to happen with all of this. I just want to make sure that the really bad guys are exposed and the people who are not so bad are not tarnished and blackened, because it seems terribly unfair. As always, a great pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.